the way you think is the same. I don't mean like you will think the same stuff, like just if you bring up something, right? Because your experiences in life, your background, all of that is different, maybe your skills and everything. But a person that if they went through exactly what you went through would make the same decisions or like roughly the same decisions, that's the kind of person I think makes a really valuable co-founder. So that's like my number one criteria.
Welcome to another amazing episode of the Tech Business Roundtable podcast, brought to you by Equa.tech, the leader in digital marketing for tech companies. We want to first take a moment to thank you for sharing this podcast with your friends and on social media and helping us grow week after week. Meet our host of today's TBR episode, Ryan Davies. Ryan is the Director of Marketing of Equa.tech and is a dynamic leader in driving business transformation through technology. Over to you, Ryan.
Welcome, everyone, to the Tech Business Roundtable podcast show. This is a podcast show dedicated to shining a spotlight on tech innovators, entrepreneurs, founders, and the compelling narratives behind the movements that they've established. I'm your host, Ryan Davies, and I'm hosting today's discussion on startup stories from ideation to execution with Allison Mahmood. Allison, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
This is going to be a good one. I always love the personal journeys and talking about, kind of just the growth, the challenges, for our audience, it's just so critically important. There's so many people that are looking for, insight and inspiration and those tips and ideas of how we can do things and make them, better and stronger. And I think, Allison, for our listeners, started the entrepreneurial journey at 14, pitching a derivatives product to a bank at 17. And then during the COVID era, founded an impact-focused brokerage in the EU, had 36 employees, was able to run that along with going for a degree. And of course, COVID challenges being what they were and everything else, decided to pivot now and has returned to finish the studies and is gearing up for the next startup. So I think maybe, I think you'll probably shine a better light on your background and what you bring than I do. So I'm going to turn it over to you for a little bit more of an extended introduction and maybe, your journey into entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the way I actually got into doing businesses, if you ask some people, it's kind of just, I grew up around it because both my parents have businesses. They basically both studied medicine, and once they were doctors, they were like, okay, done with medicine, let's go to businesses. So to some extent, I kind of grew up around it. But the story of my first proper attempt at a business is actually quite a funny one because what happened is, so I was on a holiday with my parents in Paris, and the weather was incredibly hot, and I normally just wear normal long jeans, but my mom insisted, no, it's way too hot. You have to have shorts. And for half a day, she's like, you have to get shorts. So eventually I'm like, all right, I'll go buy some shorts. And there's this weird thing that I have is on my pants, I like to have big pockets. I don't like to carry around bags. So if any pair of trousers has small pockets, I will not wear them. So I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to wear these, it has to have big pockets. I went to a bunch of stores, 8-9 different stores, looking at their shorts. All of them had small pockets. I had zero other criteria except the pockets. None of them had properly big pockets. So eventually I'm like, okay, let's keep going. And eventually I I end up in a store where I'm like, these shorts have really big pockets. This is amazing. So I go up to the counter and I'm like, hey, I'll take this pair. The issue is, at that store, they tell me, oh, we only do wholesale, which was quite expected. But, spending that much time already just looking for shorts, and I am not a person that enjoys shopping for clothes, I was like, well, what's the minimum order volume? They're like, oh, $500 is for for the pack. So I was like, okay. Let me go back to my parents. So I went back to my parents and I was like, hey, can I borrow $1,000? I'll pay you whatever interest. I don't remember what I agreed to. And I'll pay you back within the month. And they were like, okay, why? And I explained the idea roughly. And they were like, you know what? Go for it. because they both have their businesses, I think they were a lot more comfortable with like having me take that risk
Yeah.
with $1,000. So I was like, perfect. So I go back to the store, order 2 sets because I ended up so 2 packages. So that's, I think it was like about 50 pairs of shorts.
Yep.
Actually, probably more. I don't remember the exact number. Essentially, 2 large packs of shorts and have them ship it to my house in Czech Republic. Funniest part of it is, I never ended up taking a pair of shorts for me to wear. So after spending $1,000 on shorts, I didn't even have shorts in Paris. So I ended up wearing jeans the rest of the time because I think my parents gave up at that point. They're like, "How much is it going to cost next time?" So then, once we got back to Czech Republic, I think a week later, the shorts arrive, and I was like, well, "Okay, well, now I actually have to figure out how to sell these because I promised I was going to pay it back in a month." And the kind of natural thought was, well, I could just sell to customers, do some online store thing. But I was like, that's too much effort. I'm not going to sell shorts ever again. I can't be bothered doing that.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, where do the other stores, like, normal fashion stores, where do they get their clothes, right? Some are chains that a lot of them just buy them from different places. So I ended up like being like, okay, well, I can wholesale them to boutiques. I got a great price on them because I bought them straight from the supplier. They can, take a little bit of a margin. So I'll take a little bit of margin. They can then sell them. I got these like a great price compared to like what I like when I was Googling around shorts were going for. So I was like, yeah, I'll give them a good deal. I'll dump them off. So as this like 14-year-old kid, in a t-shirt and jeans, like going to like boutique fashion stores and being like, hey, can I speak to the owner? Oh, the owner's not here. Okay, can I have their number? Okay, thank you. Come back a bit later. Speak to the owner. Oh, so I have these shorts I want to sell you. Like, oh, not interested. So I kept doing that whenever I had the free time for like 2, 3, 4, 5 days, and nobody would consider me. And then eventually, one store owner was like, well, I'm not going to buy them, but if you want, I can take them on consignment, and then once they sell, we'll pay you the money. And I was like, and just call me in a week how it's going, so I have an idea. And instead of calling me in a week, I get a phone call 3 days later, being like, "Hey, we sold out. We need more. When can you get us more?" Like, more? What? What?
There's no more.
So yeah, I think I was at school at that. Like I was literally like in between classes, walking to the next class, get a phone call. We need more shirts.
Yeah.
What's going on? I was like, just call me later. So call back later. And then I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll try this. Might as well. And then I kind of continued scaling that for a little bit, made a bit of money, and then at a certain point, I was like, okay, I think I know enough from this business to move on. Because I think one thing to know is for me, up until that brokerage that I had, so that would be basically up until COVID. So 2-3 years ago. How long has it been since COVID? Yeah, about
right.
then.
It feels like 100 years ago.
Yeah. I always looked at like the business I was doing as I want to learn something from this. Because I was like, well, I'm not going to, at 14, start the thing that I'm going to stick with in the long run. So like, I want to learn something from this. Yeah. So then between the ages of like 14 until, I was 19. Yeah, it's probably, but I think it was 19 when I started the brokerage. Each kind of business I was trying out, I was like, okay, what skills can I learn from this? And then once I like learned it, I was comfortable with it, I would just shut it down. Because at the time, like my parents don't come from a background where like they sell their businesses. They just keep running them.
Right.
So I had like I was aware you could like sell your business, do that kind of stuff because I was quite involved in interested in finance and stuff like that. But I wasn't fully like, how do I go about selling this? So I was like, yeah, I just can't be bothered. I doubt it's worth that much, and I would just shut it down. I did have a friend recently, actually not that recent, like 6 months ago, I spoke to. Where I found this like old accounting thing for one of the things I did, and he was giving me, he was like, you could have sold that for like 3 times the revenue you made in a year. You could have made a lot of money. I was like, it doesn't matter, it's fine. Yeah. But so now should have sold them, but too late. So then so the 17 thing when I had the derivatives product, basically with a friend. We're at CERN at the Large Hadron Collider. We get talking. He mentioned some weird math because he was obsessed with math.
Yep.
I'm really interested in math. I end up talking to him. The conversation ends up at an idea for like a way to structure offloading risk for certain types of positions. And then I'm like, well, let's do it. Like, let's figure out if this is possible. We end up chasing that, figuring out, well, seems like it's possible. Go pitch it, like, reach out to banks. Eventually, some banks hears us out. Unfortunately, in one of the meetings with that bank, like one of the MDs was like, oh, by the way, you can structure the risk the same way by doing this. I was like, okay, well, what we're doing is useless. But thanks anyway. And then moved on from there. And that like really got me interested in like traditional finance because I had I've had some experience around crypto from before.
Yep.
Actually, I'm going on too many tangents, but I'm going to tell one more story.
I love it.
So the way I got into crypto is, so usually when so my school was on the other side of the city, so I didn't like 35-40 minutes to get home.
Yep.
And usually I would take the tube or the metro. But if it was really nice weather or if there was some disruption, I would take a tram, which would take like an hour and a half. But like you do what you can when you're taking public transport. I wasn't allowed to drive back then. So I'm on this tram going home one day, and Prague is a very old city. Like majority of it's like very nice historical buildings, and among these nice historical buildings, I see just a black building in between two of them. Why is there like a fully like not gray wall, like black, like completely black, windows blacked out, everything blacked out. I'm like, okay, I need to see what this is. I get off on the next stop. I walk back to that building. I'm like, well, I don't see any signs. So I just kind of tried the door, walk in. Turns out it was like a crypto hacker space thing. And that's like how I ended up learning from them a bunch around crypto, a bit more about like coding and stuff. Because I already had an interest then, but there's some people that were quite knowledgeable about some of it. But yeah, so that's how I ended up getting into crypto because they painted their wall black. But yeah, so where was I? Yeah, so the derivatives product is how I like got into kind of more proper, serious traditional finance.
Yep.
And then that, when there was COVID, I was like, well, a few months in, me and an acquaintance of mine were talking, and we were like, well, this is not going to stop anytime soon. Because clearly, like at this point, it was starting to be pretty clear, like, okay, this is going to take at least a year, maybe longer. Uni is useless because I was doing physics, and in first year physics in the UK, right?
Yeah.
There's like some labs which are like somewhat useful.
Yep.
And then there's a lot of theory stuff, which for me, because I wasn't from the UK, I already knew a lot of it because for us, we learned it before. So I was like, well, this is a waste of my time. Let's do something useful. We ended up starting that brokerage. He ended up leaving due to like medical issues he had and stuff. But yeah, then I ran it until, June of last year. So that would be June 22. Yeah, it's 23 now. So yeah, so it went about June 22.
It's amazing. I mean, I think, again, you've got so much in physics, in software development, in finance. And I think, fate sometimes finds you, like you said, you walk into places just because of curiosity and where you're going. You've done so much already in everything that you've done. Your experience with working with early stage startups, I think that's something where a lot of our listening audience would be really interested to hear what you feel, what you've learned, the key elements for contributing to building a successful tech startup. And like, is it, again, building relationships? Is it, partnering with the right people? I'm sure you've got, the recipe goes on, but I'm sure you've got a lot of insight in terms of, hey, here's more of the things that are more important. And maybe here's the things people say are important, but I would put them a little lower on the priority list personally.
Fair. So I think, because, there's definitely people that are way more experienced than me, but I've noticed a lot of things that I'm doing differently because I'm now working on on another startup. Now as in like the current project we're working on, we've been at for a week exactly as of today. So,
oh, wow. Yeah,
not that long, but I already noticed some stuff I'm doing differently. So I'll try to kind of base it off of that so that it's stuff that like I would change. So it's more tangible.
Very fresh. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a few things that I think people, people can change around, like how they approach the business, how they evaluate stuff. But with startups, most people end up looking for a co-founder, right? You want to be working with somebody, and there's a lot of different advice people will give you, right? People are like, "Ooh, start it with a friend." Some people are like, "Ooh, never start with family." Some people are like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you have to do this." And I think, because I've been going through Entrepreneur First, where they're like a very early stage investor, like before you even have your idea, which is an interesting investment thesis, I must say. I've been going through like a lot of teams and talking with a lot of different people and trying to see, how that would potentially work. And it really stands out to me how there's one criteria that I found to matter far more than anything else to me personally, and that's like how the way they think works. Because I think everybody can imagine in their life, like you have that friend or that person where they will tell you they made some super weird decision, and just from hearing that first, like, this is what I did, you're like, crazy, what is this? But then they and you basically you ask that, like, hey, why the hell did you do that? And then they say like a sentence, and they're like getting ready to spend 10 minutes explaining it, but within that first sentence you're like, yeah, okay, got it, never mind, you're completely right, I would do the same thing in your situation. That's the kind of person that you want us to co-found with, right? Now there are all the like skills, like, okay, if you are both super commercial and neither of you knows how to code, and your entire startup is going to teach people how to code, probably like that needs to factor in. But I think that similarity, like, I think it's like, because in a way it's efficiency of communication between the two of you, but what it is based off of is like how you two think is so important. Because I was working with somebody a few weeks ago where we were kind of looking at doing something, and we were onto something like very interesting. We're looking at open banking, stuff like that. But one thing I noticed is like every time we would get into a discussion about something more complex, something where like the two of us had contradicting views, me trying to explain my perspective as opposed to being like, I explain it and now we discuss which is better. I would spend like 20 minutes explaining my perspective. He would spend half an hour, maybe 15, 20 minutes also like explaining his perspective. And only after that we could have a discussion on like who is right or like which way we should go. Yeah. And that is a massive time waster, because that won't be you don't have these discussions when you're doing a business once a quarter, right? You're not a board, you're in the business. So that discussions happen every day. So that efficiency matters a massive amount. So to me, I've kind of realized like that is my number one criteria. And to be clear, when I say like the way you think is the same, I don't mean like you will think the same stuff. Like just if you bring up something, right? Because your experiences in life, your background, all of that is different. Maybe your skills and everything. But a person that if they went through exactly what you went through would make the same decisions or like roughly the same decisions, that's the kind of person I think makes a really valuable co-founder. So that's like my number one criteria.
I love that. That's incredible. I think, again, talking about these like the early stages in marketing success for tech startups, are there specific milestones or achievements or anything that stand out to you as particularly meaningful? I know everyone says, the first client or the first dollar or something like that, of course. Okay. Those are there, but things where you're like, okay, this is something that you really need to celebrate, embrace, understand that, this is a big step in the journey for founders to take.
I think I have one idea of something that, because also going through it, there's a lot of other people here, so I see how they approach ideas and how they go through them. Mm-hmm. I think the first big milestone, and this is literally like the earliest milestone you're gonna hit, unless like, okay, you might talk to one person and they're like, we're paying you for everything. But your first milestone for most people is gonna be when you find out that the original version of your idea doesn't work and you need to pivot, you need to make some changes to it, and how you can go through with that, right? Because I've seen a lot of teams form here at EF, people like looking into working together. And then the original idea they were looking at, they kind of like, okay, this doesn't work, but based on all these learnings, we could try this aspect because of it, and we could solve it this way and this way. And oftentimes that's the stage a lot of teams end up breaking up, because people are like, oh, well, I don't actually, not super happy doing this, not super pursuing this, blah, blah. And then they end up like being like, okay, well, yeah, we shouldn't actually go through with this together. So that first pivot, and like not the small pivot, right? Like if you want to build a company selling baseballs and you realize instead of manufacturing them in Jersey, you're going to manufacture them in Delaware. Like who cares? That's small. But I mean, like a fundamental large change to what you originally thought you were going to be doing. If you find that like in the first major change like that, which if you're really going at it should happen within the first 2 weeks, that is, I think, like a very important stepstone, a very important step, because that's when majority of people will give up and or like, you know, you'll notice like, oh, that person's only happy to work on this specific thing. So in reality, as the business goes on, they wouldn't want to stick with it. So maybe that person's not even like right to pursue business in that area, or maybe, you know, you just realize, hey, you're the one who doesn't want to do this. So going through that first pivot is where I think most people end up giving up. Because to be fair, like if you think about like stories from people, they're like, oh, you know, I was thinking about doing this startup, but then I never did. And you talk to them, they usually kind of spend about like a week and a half looking into it before they give up. So crossing that, so I feel like it probably lines up with that like first major pivot you have to go through.
And what do you find are like when you're doing that? I guess not necessarily the reasons why people are giving up, but how are you successful in, like you said, testing and then recognizing the pivot? Because I think you're right. There's people that just say, hey, it's not right. It's already out there. Whatever it is, they get to discovery and they bail on it. Or the other part is, I mean, again, you know, it's too hard, or I don't know where to go next. But you've been able to do that, to kind of understand and get good feedback. So like, where are you getting that feedback and that understanding from? Again, is this just really strong networking and collaboration and that sort of strategy behind it, so that you're and being able to recognize, okay, maybe that's not the idea, but maybe this is now after drilling down, continuing to do that.
So I think it's what you do with it whenever you have a new business idea, right? Is you find the people that work in the space, you find the people that will be using this, and you set up meetings with all of them, and then some will agree to meetings, and you just talk to them, right? Like when we were looking at that open banking thing, you know, within 2 weeks we went from can't even, you know, we're having a really hard time getting people to talk to us, to basically talk to the heads of open banking at different banks, right? Like people are super willing to talk to you, right? Anybody will talk to you, unless you're dealing with like, you know, like when companies have researchers that are covered by NDAs, people are really scared of NDAs. Like even this is the one thing I noticed, even if their NDA covers like the smallest portion of their work, people are scared of them. A lot of people don't understand what exactly is covered by their NDA.
Right.
So that is one area where like dealing with things covered by NDAs, that's going to be difficult. But otherwise, like anybody can talk to you. Like people want to talk about the work they do. Like most people, they go home, they're like, oh, I hate my work. Or like, you know, they their friends around them aren't really that interested in their work. And so people that like are in these positions that like really dedicated themselves to spend years and years pursuing, like they want to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
So you like, they'll just like, you tell them like, hey, I'm building this cool new thing. I want to learn about this. I want to do this. They'll tell you. And if you're, as far as like how to ask them questions in the actual calls, I think the mom test is like the universal standard. It's actually genuinely such fundamentally good advice for anybody that like has to do a lot of these calls.
I love that. I think, you know, it's funny, even just in, like you said, in casual conversation, there's a group of 3 of us and 2 of us are super deep into tech and AI, and the third one could care less. And you just see the drain of the, oh, they're going into this again, right? But if you get the 2 of us together, we're good to go and go nonstop, right? So you see that, just like you said, whether it's just to have somebody who wants to try and talk at that level about what they do. People love talking about themselves, right? So get people talking about that. You know, I know we're kind of getting deeper into this one, but I'd love to kind of get a feel from you about, you know, we've talked a lot about your journey and things like that, but what really excites you most about the future of entrepreneurship and technology? Like, do you see any trends or developments that are kind of shaping the landscape right now? Is it things like, you know, Entrepreneur First, where you've got these really unique, different ways of doing things and securing a future for startups? Or again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll let you take it away.
Yeah. So I think there's three things that I could probably highlight that are from three very different areas. I think one that is at like the later stage of it is I've noticed that like if you ever go and observe someone that uses like ChatGPT a lot in their work,
Yep.
and you then compare that to how managers communicate with their employees, you notice that it's like eerily similar in the way they give instructions and describe stuff. Now, yes, GPT a bit more hands-on, but if they're giving that exact same task to a person working for them, it would be like eerily close. And I've seen people, trying turning GPT into like virtual employees,
Yep.
which it's way too early for. But I think we will get there within like 2-3 years. And that will massively accelerate how you can operate, right? Getting good people on your team, like you will still need them because the discussions you have, the ideas that come from it, like that's invaluable.
Right.
But there is a lot of like work that it just needs to get done, and it just takes time, and you just can't do it yourself because there's too much other to do.
Yep.
Where you can't handle that volume until you have enough revenue to hire those people. So it usually takes a bit more time. And a lot of that can be to some extent replaced by even, like models like GPT, which I sorry. which I think is going to be quite exciting to see how that goes. Now, on the end of what excites just me about entrepreneurship in general, I don't know. I love, like, this is a weird way to put it, but somebody asked me this like a few months ago, and my first thought was, it's a weird way to think about it. Like, what is the act of running a business? You have to fix it. And for me, that just makes me happy. I just like solving these problems. I like dealing with it. I think that's what like excites me personally about entrepreneurship. Well, the thing is, I don't like the word entrepreneurship. I think it's probably because I'm like from Eastern European background, where like entrepreneurship is just a scammer. If you're running a business, you're just a businessman. But whatever, weird tangent. But that's like, I think to me, that's what excites me. I think for a lot of people, that's something they don't think about enough when it comes to like, what is it like running a business? Because a lot of people mention like, a lot of people imagine running a business being kind of like the actual work of a contractor, and how that often operates. But, if you, I don't know, you love cameras and you want to make the next Nikon and, replace them because all the technical stuff, you probably shouldn't be the one running that business if what you really, really love doing is building the cameras, because that's very little of your work, right? You have to love the space, right? So don't go start a business in an area where you're like, I do not care about any of this. But the reality of the work of like running a business is you fix it again. Now you've tried fixing, the fix didn't work, you got to go fix that too, right? That's all business essentially ends up being. So it's one thing where, and this isn't what you asked, but like one thing I think is important for people to think about is like, when you're looking at starting a business, what is the work that you're like really looking to do? But yeah, anyway. And then the third thing, because I said I was going to say three, that excites me about entrepreneurship, I think there seems to be a change in how people think about it. Because, if you go, okay, based on what I've heard, because I'm not 40, so I don't know how it was 40 years ago, but based on what, like, if you're 40 years ago, when you imagine what you hear from people, running a business is like a dry thing you do, make money, okay, whatever. And then what I've seen, because when I was 14, so like 2014, this wasn't really as much of a thing, but I feel like between like 2017 to like still to the to like 2022, I feel like over COVID there was a change in sentiment, but it's only starting. Entrepreneurship was like the thing everybody wanted to do. They're like, ooh, I'll do a drop shipping thing, ooh, I'll do that thing. Like businesses that the business model makes sense in some cases, but it's very complicated to get it like right at scale properly. So oftentimes people try it, doesn't work, try it more, doesn't work, and they don't reach that point where they're like, okay, I'm really going to take this seriously as a business and figure it out. And it was kind of trendy to be an entrepreneur. So, but now what I'm noticing is that, so, okay, I, so people being like running a business super boring, whatever, blah, blah, that doesn't bother me, but I feel like that's something where people miss out on pursuing that when they would be really good at it.
Yeah.
Then there's the second one where it was like the 2016, 17 until like pretty recently, potentially, arguably, it's still the predominant trend today. Is like people are way too excited. People who will hate running a business end up trying running businesses, and I think that's going to just result in a lot of people being unhappy with what they're doing, and just hating it. And also, like trying out a business is a lot of risk. And while I am like all for taking risks and like just go for it, try it, I've seen a lot of people start businesses and those businesses do well, and they hate it because they'll do the work. Like they're very intelligent, they're very capable, they'll get it done, and they will have like a 10, 20, $30 million business. So pretty all right. Like, okay, to be clear, I'm very biased from like being around startups right now. So successful businesses I hear are like a billion. 20, like 10, 20, 30 million is a very successful business. But anyway, end of tangent. So, but they will hate what they're doing. And oftentimes because they aren't as, they don't love the idea of how businesses work, they also weren't that interested in learning in it. So they structured their business in a way where they can't just go and sell it, or it'll be like very difficult. So they end up hating their life, and they're locked in to this thing that they hate. They can't sell, they can't do anything about. It's very hard to outsource. And it's going to take them like 5 to 7 years to get out of, unless they want to just lose all of it, which when that much money is involved, people are very, very, hard to convince to just give up $20-30 million a year. So it created a lot of people that were kind of pursuing stuff that they hated. And I think what I'm starting to see now as a trend is like a lot of the, people are becoming more conscious of the options they have about pursuing the things that they love, right? If things not love, but like they would enjoy. Like if you have, like I have a former classmate of mine who is an artist, and back in school, she had every potential to go pursue like work in finance, work as a lawyer, work whatever. She loved art, and I feel like from what I've heard from some people, some of my acquaintances, which all be like, oh yeah, someone like that would never pursue art because there's just no money in it. But by doing some freelance stuff, by being able to have a very wide network of clients across the world, that being easier, she can do some kind of, freelancing to cover costs of being an artist and really like do what she loves, which is creating 3D art, right? And with businesses going through COVID and experiencing what it's like having employees remote, and to be clear, I'm really not a fan of the whole remote thing. Like I ran the startup, the brokerage during COVID, so it was all remote, and it's so much less efficient. Like it works, right? You can have a very viable business, but it's just the efficiency, not a fan. But it opened businesses up to a lot more to having freelancers, having people work in that format. And I think the skill gap from being an employee working in something to being a freelancer, there's still a pretty notable one. Because as a freelancer, you need to know, because if you're an employee, your manager kind of has to assign the task properly. Like it's their job to figure that out. Right. As a freelancer, you might have a client come to you that's like, I have no clue, I just want this. And then you have to know how to ask them the right questions to get the result that you want. But ultimately, that's very much like a skill that you need to learn. That's not a passion for running a business that you need. And so by that becoming more normal for businesses, by more people thinking about it, by that becoming kind of more popular starting to grow in popularity and awareness, I think it's going to end up in a lot more people actually being like, this is the work I love. This is the part of being, my hobby or my job that I really enjoy. Let me be a freelancer just doing this. And I think that's the right decision for a lot of people, because people look at a business, people look at what they love and they're like, I'll start a business in it. And for some, they get kind of lucky and they love the process of running a business, and then that's great for them. But for a lot of people, they hate the process of running a business. They just love the stuff they were doing. And until recently, they just, most people were just like, oh no, you don't freelance. If you love what you're doing, you want to pursue at a higher scale, you go start a business. And that just never made sense to me, because the work is different. Like I spend, when I started the brokerage, like I was like, oh, this is, like area of finance, trading, investing, managing stuff, understanding how clearing works and everything. That was what I was like, that's really cool. What I really spent most of my time doing, later on was like, oh, I have this meeting, that meeting, this meeting, that meeting. A little bit earlier on, oh, I have to go also meeting to HR to figure out this culture stuff. Oh, I have that contract. Like the work is not the area that you chose and love. So if what you love, what you're doing, just go freelance. And I love that it's become more popular.
I think that's just an incredible, again, so much to think about in this episode, where people, like you said, hey, I don't love what I do, so I'm going to start my own business and be my own boss, and I'm going to do what I love. And it's like, are you though? And like, there's just so many things here to be able to take away for our listeners to kind of have that pre-vetting checklist almost to make sure you're really doing what it is, or are you just doing elements of what you love, or is it in the field that you love, whatever it is here. So I think that's just a perfect, great place to maybe even just press pause until we have another discussion on this. But, what I want to do is just at the very end here, turn it over again, Allison, to you for our listeners to get in contact with you. How would that happen? How do we get in contact with you, follow what you're doing, all of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, thanks. So I don't I post stuff in random places, wherever. So if you are someone that likes Twitter or LinkedIn, just Google me. I'll pop up. I have a unique enough name that I'm at the top of the first 20 results are all me. So look at my name. I'll be there. If you want to see what I'm working on right now, but we're probably going to rename it by the time this episode comes out, because I'm not sure how long it's out. Go to intio.news, which is intio.news. It's the thing I'm working on right now. Hopefully, it's, that website still works by the time this comes out. If not, Google me. It'll be somewhere across all my social media.
Or the
thanks
show
for having me
notes
on.
and
It was
everything
really
else.
fun.
Yeah, we'll have it there for you for sure. So definitely continue to follow Allison's journey, and reach out, connect. I'm sure there's so many things. There's always questions that come from our audience that say, boy, I'd love to, that one thing that was said, I just want to really, dig deeper on it. And I think there's great conversations to be had. But with that, I think, sorry, go ahead, Allison. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I'm always happy to talk to people. So if any questions, anything you're that made no sense, just hit me up wherever. Usually LinkedIn's probably easiest because I check it the most right now, but whatever works.
I love it. That's perfect. Take advantage, as I always say to our listeners, when you get that opportunity. It's a wonderful, to have two minds meet like that. So there, I think, is where we'll leave it for today. And I want to take a minute here to thank Allison Mahmood for this incredible, amazing podcast of startup stories from ideation to execution. And I also want to thank our listeners. We can't do what we do without you. So until we meet again with another amazing TBR episode, I'm your host, Ryan Davies. Take care out there.
Thank you, Ryan, for this amazing episode. Thank you for joining us on the Tech Business Roundtable podcast. We hope our discussions have sparked new ideas, expanded your knowledge, and empowered you on your entrepreneurial journey. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and write us a positive review. Thank you for listening to the Tech Business Roundtable podcast show.